Very good thing. But let's go back a little bit to the lesson also, because I was supposed to talk to you about measurements, which I haven't done at all so far. I'm sure you know what measurements are about, don't you? I mean, you do know what a scale is, and you know how to measure something. Or can somebody tell me, how do you, if you were to measure a room, how would you do it?
Could you repeat the question again, please?
You know, this whole lesson was, it started off initially that we should be talking about measurements of spaces and of rooms. Now, do you know how to measure a room? I mean, would you know how to take a tape, a measuring tape perhaps, and measure a room, like its width and length and height and so on? Have you done it at all or not?
Measuring tape like length, width, height, area, surface area, and so forth.
Yes. You've done it? Have you done your room, for instance? Have you measured the room that you are in right now?
No, we haven't actually taken the measurements of our room in particular, but if we do know how to do it.
Okay. And I hope that you do it sort of, on a sketchbook with your hand, do you? Or are you all too high-tech to do it that way?
So the question is, when you do take down measurements, do you take it down by your hand, or do you use some other form of technology to record your measurements? West Mountain Charter. I just got word also, I just want to interject really quickly. The other school in Florida, they're stuck with state testing, so unfortunately they won't be able to participate today, but it's great news for West Mountain Charter because Yasmin is all yours.
But you know one thing, even if you were to use now the new kind of tools that you have with technology, when I was studying architecture, which was light years away it seems now, my teacher always told us that we should really have a sketchbook in our hand, and we should be sketching, or maybe making freehand sketches. And if you want to take measurements, the best thing is to do that, is to take a notebook or a sketchbook and record everything, freehand with your hand. That is always the easiest way to do it. You can always transfer it later onto a computer, but the best thing is to do it that way. Because, I don't know how many of you will finally, might opt for architecture and might become architects, but when you are collecting information, and if you somehow do it by hand, it all somehow goes straight directly into your mind. And when you're designing a building, all this comes in very handy if you have a good brief, if you know what the client or the person who's going to use the building or persons who are going to use the building want and can be comfortable with. So I don't know whether you're going to prepare a brief, but I think it's a good idea for you to prepare a brief when you go out to Ecuador or wherever and try to see how you apply that. A lot of times when architects are designing, there are lots of bits and pieces like jigsaw puzzles that are there, and they seem to be floating around, and you don't know how they're going to come together. And a lot of times with me it's happened, and I'm sure it has happened with many other architects also, that when you're sleeping, the whole thing comes together. So it's good to know a lot of things. You should be doing a lot of research. You should be measuring things to understand the scale of things, and how a whole volume actually comes about in terms of its, its length and breadth and height, and then try to see how that can all be used. I don't know if it's making sense because you're not architects, so I'm not sure, how much I should go into talking about architecture rather than just, the simple things like measurements.
So, West Mountain Charter, do you have any further questions about scales or measurements? It sounds like it's a very fundamental and critical tool in the world of architecture and design. So, do you have any questions in regards to that? If not, do you have any other questions for Yasmin?
Yeah, we have another question about the culture aspect once again. Where have you ever gone to a place where you don't know anything about the culture, and how is it that you're able to prepare?
Yeah, quite right. I think it's a very good question. It's very difficult to know about another culture if you haven't actually grown up in it. As I said to you, I went to England for my studies when I was very, very young. And I was taught things and I understood things which when I came back, I found had no relevance or very little relevance to how things were in Pakistan. So I set about doing a lot of research. I felt I did not know enough about myself and about my roots. I don't know if you know a little bit about the history of the subcontinent. We had the British as rulers for something like 200 years. And when we were growing up, there was a lot of Western influence on us, which is not a bad thing. But I think unless you are strong within yourself and you understand yourself, as much as possible, other influences can take you off the right sort of path, if you like, or the correct way to do things. So I went about by researching, by reading up a lot, by visiting a lot of old towns. Because see, a lot of times the old towns are a depository of living culture. These old towns have not only the buildings that belong to the older times, but also a lot of traditions that continue to be practiced there. So if you visit, wherever you go, the best places where you can understand culture or the cultural aspects of a particular community, go to the informal settlements, the so-called shanty towns, and go to the walled cities, the old cities of that particular country. And you will get to know everything. You'll get to know not only the tangible heritage, you'll also get to know the intangible heritage, which is to do with music and dance and folklore and so on, and crafts. So I would suggest if you want to go and build somewhere, or if you want to go and give advice, you go around a few days and visit the shanty towns and the old cities. Does that answer your question?